My mic's on now, so you can probably hear me in the kitchen.
And now I can. Now I know.
Technology comes very slowly to me, much like the Penguins protecting 2-goal leads.
Oh, good lord! I mean, it. I actually, it's weird, but I kind of almost forgot about the 2-goal lead problems, and then like after gave up the first one, I'm like, oh crap! Wait, this is a thing. Like because they haven't done it lately. I mean, they
No,
haven't had many two goal leads, I
well,
guess, but
they did it in Carolina the other night, but that was the first time it had happened in a while, I think, relatively speaking.
yeah,
But I don't. I think that's the seventh or eighth time this season now they've lost a game when they were up 2 goals. I mean, it's an embarrassing number, and it's very easy to blame the goaltending. We'll get to him in a second, but a lot of things happened. It was really bad penalty killing on the third goal. I didn't like the call on Lazat late in the third
no, I
period.
didn't
I
like
thought
that
that was
either.
a really weak call. Especially for some of the stuff they let go in this game. I'm not in the locker room tonight, so I don't know what the players or Mike Sullivan had to say about it. I'm guessing they weren't real thrilled with that call, but you gotta, kill a penalty. I'm sorry. It's both of their power play goals were big mistakes in front of the net. Marcus Pedersen on both, I believe, was a little out of position and not good. But as we know, goal prevention is not the Penguins' strength. I don't know what the Penguins' strength is exactly, but it sure as hell isn't goal prevention. And they find different ways to blow leads for sure. And I hate to be too hard on Tristan, but you're up 3-1 past the halfway mark of the third period, and he turned the puck over, which is what led to the second Columbus goal. It wasn't like a grotesque turnover, but he still very clearly hesitated for a moment and made a poor play with the puck. That's what got that entire play ignited. And that's always the problem with him. It's just the mental errors when he spaces out for just a moment. And that was a bad time. I actually didn't think he played poorly tonight at all. I thought he was pretty sharp. And the first and third goals, I certainly don't put on him at all. But the little mental errors like that, you just can't have it. Especially, I know it sounds funny calling this a big game, but look at the standings. It kind of was.
Yeah,
It was just a terrible loss. I actually thought they were pretty good in the second and third periods. That's the shame of it for the Penguins. They stunk in the first period. They were really sluggish. Second and third periods, even playing without Malkin, that top line was sensational. I thought they were clearly the better team. You can't lose that game. It's just especially when you've already lost 2 games in a row in extra time, and you blew the one in Carolina after having the 2-goal advantage in the first period. Just not a good setback. And now you got McJesus coming to town in 48 hours. So not a great turn of events for the Penguins.
yes, yeah, it is not. And Tristan certainly going back to his reverting back to his old self. The old Islanders turnover rearing its ugly head. And I wonder if maybe the Penguins are now trying to be the Islanders of last year. I think it was the Islanders last year that made it to the playoffs with like 57 overtime losses. Um, so I don't know. It's
Well, you know what? It's different tonight, though. I think to get a point in Florida and to get a point in Raleigh, like you'd probably sign up for that.
mhm.
When you're on the road against the champ and you're in Raleigh where you haven't won in 7 years, like you'll probably take 2 out of 4 points in those two. But home to the Blue Jackets with a 3-1 lead in the third period, that's a different story. And again, not to give Jari too much of the blame here, but well, he deserves a lot of it. Let's be honest. He is completely lost in shootouts.
Oh, he's
I
terrible.
mean, Jesus, I don't know what he's. I mean, you could just tell it's in his head. I realize, the art of stopping breakaways is a little different for every goaltender, and we certainly got spoiled over the years watching Flower. Back in the old days, you get to the shootout, that's pretty much a guaranteed 2 points when Flower and all the Penguin stars were young. But they certainly aren't quite as good on shootouts, the big guys as they once were. We've certainly seen that with Sid. I think some regression in shootouts the last 3 or 4 years with him. But Jari, I mean, he is just awful in shootouts, and he shouldn't be. He is a big athletic goaltender. He's tailor made physically to be pretty good against breakaways, but again, it's the same thing with him when it becomes a mental thing. You can like literally see him thinking as skaters or the shooters skate down against him. You can just see it. It's like it's in slow motion for him, and he's trying to outthink them. and it's not working. It's a very, very clear problem for the Penguins.
Yeah, and I would say emblematic of many of Jari's issues would be how soft his stick was on the game winner. Just it I hate to say this about, but I would just describe him as soft, and he let that puck just squeeze right through him, no problem. I see a couple of you guys have requested, so I'm going to bring up Murad first. Anyone else want to hop in line to ask Josh some questions about the Penguins? Vent,
And you
tell
don't even
us
have
what
to
you.
keep those questions within the boundaries of good taste because it's just like Twitter. There's no rules. Just,
Yeah. This is just like Twitter. It goes on our podcast, so
I
this
mean, don't be
isn't
a
like.
jerk. We might hang up on you, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah, but you're allowed. I mean, you can even ask Josh about dating advice, like if you
oh,
want.
don't ask me about dating advice. Jesus, that's actually do whatever. Do the opposite of what I do, and you'll be very happy for life.
All right, Murad, we'll bring you up here. Um, Murad, what's on your mind?
Hi, Mirad.
Love your guys' show. I always watch it. I can't wait for it to come out every week, and I always watch it. And Josh, I love reading your articles.
I appreciate
Always
that.
Oh,
always very
thanks.
informative
Thanks.
and very fun to read. Yeah, it's just I was thinking about the Jari thing because I'm a goalie also, and I'm just like watching him. He has like the athletic tools, like a little bit like Flurry does, not exactly, but I just don't understand with him. He always in the shootout, it just looks like he's so shaky and he doesn't
Oh,
can't make his mind up what he wants to do. Like I personally just I don't get it. He has all the athletic tools to put it together, and it's just like clear, even just to be a quality starting goalie, he has it, but it seems like it's always a mental thing with him. It's amazing how goalies work, especially for being one.
no, and I'm glad having a goalie call in seriously because, like, I've been covering the Penguins for 15 years, and the hardest part of the job for me is analyzing goaltenders and goaltending technique. I don't have a clue. It's just, I think if you haven't been a goalie, it's a really hard thing to understand. And I often walk down the press box to Penguins legend, former GM and coach Eddie Johnston, who still goes to every game at 89 years old. He, of course, was the goalie for the Boston Bruins long ago. And I ask him all the time, and he will always say it that Jari just he gets too deep in his net, and when he's not confident, that's when he gets really deep in his net. And for most goalies, that's not the answer. Henrik Lundqvist did it. That was just his thing, playing deep in the crease. But most goalies can't do it, and I completely agree with you. It's always a mental thing with Jari. It's just always.
Yeah,
You can see when he just he loses his focus more than any goalie I've ever seen, quite honestly. And the physical tools have always been there, but the more he has to think, and the tighter the game gets, and the bigger the situation, we see him crumble time and time again, and that's not a good thing for a goaltender. That's about the worst thing you can say for a goalie is that you don't really trust him in crunch time. And how could you trust him in crunch time? You just can't.
exactly. And this is just my opinion on him. It's like because a lot of fans give like I find a lot of fans giving Dubas crap because of the contract he gave him. And I'm like, I'm personally I'm kind of in between because I'm like yeah I see it, but at the same time I was like during that for time he was a free agent, I forgot when it was. Who else was the other option other than Jari? So you kind of had to like give in to what he wanted. But now it's unfortunate that he's instead of improving, he's regressed, and now it's almost unmovable.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't remember who the other goalies who were that available a couple of summers ago. And that's the whole point. It was a terrible goalie market, like really, really bad. And so I think the Penguins felt handcuffed. I know for a fact they did not want to give him a 5 year deal. Like they really didn't want to. But from their standpoint, they just had no leverage. And they knew he was, at least at that point, he had been a good regular season goaltender, which isn't everything, but it's something. So they decided to do it. And I spoke with so many people in the organization that summer who were really unsure. Like they've never trusted him. They've always known he was a tantalizing talent. Second round pick. He had the pedigree, won the Memorial Cup. Like, he had a good looking resume. And it's not like he was bad his first 2 or 3 years in the league. The guy went to two All-Star games. But when it comes to crunch time, we know more times than not what has happened with him, and we all know, like being the goaltender for this team's not easy. I mean, this is not a good defensive team. They would wreck a lot of goaltenders. There's no question. But given what the guy's being paid, it's not good enough right now. It just hasn't been.
Yeah, and it makes it hard to trust. And thanks, Red, for coming up.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
It
you guys.
it it I saw a tweet that down below. I don't know. It's a cat with a penguin logo or penguin jersey on. Said I wouldn't trust him to feed my cat. So
Wow.
that's where Penguins trust level is with Tristan Jari.
Well, I mean, I'm very good about feeding my cats. Like, they get only the finest of food, so I actually can relate with that. You can't let anybody feed your cats, for God's sake.
Yeah, and I wouldn't trust just Tristan Jari. He probably wouldn't find the bowl. He'd miss it. But anyways, Jeff, welcome to the show. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Go ahead, ask a question.
Is that me? Did you speak to
Yeah.
me?
Yep.
Okay, hey guys, Jeff and Jordan here. Hey, from
Hey.
Fly Penguins Fly
Oh,
podcast, and we just wanted to drop in and say hello to Cory and Josh. And I'm gonna just read my tweet that I wrote a minute ago, and then let you guys do with it what you will. We're at an undisclosed location that serves alcohol and food in the South Hills, and here is my piece for Penguins fans and hockey fans around the world. The 2024-2025 Pittsburgh Penguins are fully cooked. They will miss the playoffs. Enjoy Crosby, Malkin, Letang, and Rust. Pedersen will be traded at 12:01 a.m. on deadline day. The window is closed. Sullivan will coach elsewhere next season. Hashtag Let's Go Pens, and thank you very much and good night.
That a lot of things probably are true there. I don't know if apparently Sullivan has the Tomlin immunity, um, but certainly Pedersen will be traded at 12:01.
that was very dramatic, by the way. I
Yeah,
enjoyed that.
yeah,
Yeah, Marcus is going to get traded. By the way, Marcus is having a terrible season. Like, I feel like this has been under the radar a little bit. It's so easy to, point out when Eric Carlson does weird Eric Carlson things, even though he was great tonight. Um, Marcus hasn't been great. I didn't like how he played the first or third goal this evening, but he's as good as gone. That is very true. Um, as for the other stuff, you mentioned Sully. Like, I don't know if he has Tomlin level immunity. I think the difference is, and listen, Sullivan deserves his share of criticism. Sure, he does. But his best players are all so old that I think it's hard to take them seriously as Stanley Cup contenders. It just is. People don't want to hear that. They want somebody to blame, but Crosby's 37, Malkin's 38, Letang's 37. Like, nobody in their right mind thought they would be Stanley Cup contenders at this point in time. So, whereas the Steelers in the last few years, they still had the TJ Watts of the world in their primes, and Tomlin for years had Ben Roethlisberger, a Hall of Fame quarterback, in his prime, and we've seen the results. So anytime I criticize Tomlin, there's always somebody out there. What about Sully? Like,
yeah.
okay, well, I get it, and he's not above criticism, but I happen to think he's a better coach than Mike Tomlin, quite frankly. And I also think he's dealing with a far greater degree of difficulty than Mike Tomlin is. So there is that.
Yeah, yeah, and I've been I think mildly critical of Sullivan, but I think he's shown his coaching chops, getting them back into a playoff race. The message at least is getting through somewhat, but still not for 2-goal leads. So that tends to be the
No doubt.
problem. Glenn, welcome to the show. Go ahead, you're up next.
Thanks a lot, Cory and Josh. I'm happy to be on here. I turn on the Penguins tonight, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, they're going to win this game. Blown Jari. More years left on his contract. Are they going to get rid of him? And I looked up Joel Bloomquist's stats. Has he been hurt down in the minors? His GAA and save percentage are similar to the NHL and the AHL. And who's the long-term future, Bloomquist or Sergei Murushov? And if also, who would be interested in Tristan Jari?
Well, thank you for the questions. That's a lot of questions. I should have been writing them all down, but
You don't have to answer all. Just answer one of them is fine.
Glenn, my man, I will see what I can do. First of all, as for Jari, I have zero doubt that if Kyle Dubas could trade him, he would do it in a heartbeat. I don't think there's any question Jari's available. I don't think anybody wants him, and when you consider his contract, it's easy to see why. And it's weird because there are so many teams in the league right now that are goaltender starved. Like, this is not a good era for goaltending. It's not like when Sid came into the league, like everyone had a star goalie at that time, it seemed like. It's not like that anymore. Even good teams, playoff teams, have major question marks in goal. Um, Colorado might be the best team in the league, but they had to bring in 2 goaltenders in the first half of the season. But still, nobody wants to touch Jarry because of the contract. So I don't think he's going anywhere. I think if Kyle could move him, he would. Um, I love Bloomquist. I think he's really good. It was a very small sample size, but not only were the numbers good, but look at some of the teams he had to play against. He was really good in Toronto. He was really good in Edmonton. Like those are the best offensive teams in the league, and he wasn't flustered at all. Like he really handled himself well. I think he's legit. I think Murashov might be more physically gifted. He's also a little more inexperienced, but between the two of them, the future looks pretty good in goal. I really think Bloomquist, if nothing less, will be a solid NHL goaltender, if not a star. Murashov is a really interesting guy. So if they could rid themselves of Jari, I promise you they would. But I just don't see it happening. The good news is he has time to play out of this and to play better and to impress teams. The salary cap's going to go way up next season. So maybe at that point, teams are more willing to take a shot on him because of that cap number going up. But until then, I just can't imagine it happening.
Is there a chance he goes that they would do waivers if no one would take him after this year?
It's always possible, I suppose. The problem is, like right now, I think when they look at Jari and Nedeljkovic and Bloomquist, whatever, they still think just in terms of this season that Jari gives them their highest ceiling, which is to say, like he is their most talented guy. Like he's done it before, where he gets hot and goes on these runs, and they're just waiting for that to surface. Whereas Nedeljkovic is a good backup; he's solid, but he comes with his physical limitations, which I can't say about Jari. So they keep waiting for him to kind of show up because they don't really have any options right now as it is. After this season, I would think, however, all bets are off the table.
Yeah, and I would think. I mean, thanks, Glenn, for coming up. I would think. I like Joe's point that he pointed out. If you put him on waivers and he clears, what's it save? It saves like $1 or $2 million on your
About
cap.
$1 million, yeah.
So just by the way, our co-host Joe Bartnick is not able to make it tonight. He's doing his day job of telling jokes and all that kind of stuff. That's the hard part of being a comedian and being a hockey fan is that he's frequently.
Yeah, you guys have dropped some pretty good jokes in here. I'm laughing.
He's usually watching backstage and then has to, whether win or lose, go on stage and
that's funny. Cory and Josh, I gotta get running. It was great.
Thanks, Glenn.
Hopefully I could drop in another time.
Anytime, Glenn. I always like guys named Glenn, by the way. I've never met a Glenn I didn't like. I just wanted to throw that out there.
All right, I'll reach out to you later, Josh.
Thanks. And I did, before we go, we'll move on to TY next, but I did get from Neo in the Matrix. They just kind of pointed out a question I thought about. Do they practice the 3-on-3 or the shootout anymore? Because they look so bad at it.
Do they practice them? Very rarely. They do shootouts maybe once or twice a month at the end of practice. I don't remember the last time they practiced 3-on-3, Cory. At the beginning of the season, they did a couple of times. I think the big problem there, like 3-on-3 is exhausting even in practice, and they're old. I mean, that's just the way it is. Like people don't want to hear that, but you think Sid and Gino want to be practicing 3-on-3 and practice every day? No, I mean it just wears them out. They already don't practice as much as most other NHL teams.
Oh, did we lose Josh?
Am I still here, Cory? Can you hear me?
Yes, you're back. You're back.
Sorry, Rob Rossi beeping in, of all people. He got the red ignore button really fast. Don't worry. But yeah, I mean, 3-on-3, they haven't been that bad. Really, just maybe in the last week, not so great. But again, like tonight, I thought they were good 3-on-3. They could have won that game 3 or 4 different times. They dominated the 3-on-3. The puck just didn't go in. Shootouts, though, Jesus. I mean, it's kind of painful to watch them in shootouts right now. Jari more than anybody, but they also just don't have the same. Sid really is starting to struggle in shootouts a bit. Letang is not what he was in shootouts. Gino's never been that great at them. So that's certainly an area of concern.
Yeah, they don't have, everybody figured out Letang's move at this point. If they could just bring Eric Christensen back. That's what
pressure.
that would solve.
Well, he always
everything.
did the same thing, but it always worked. Yeah,
exactly. Ty, what's up, man?
What's up, guys? Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Yep.
Well, first things first, I want to say that I love that you guys are doing this because I need my Penguins therapy session usually after losses.
Understandable.
Like this.
Yeah.
I appreciate it because I'm always typing up tweets, deleting them, so at least I can verbalize it.
Boy, let me tell you, I'm the same way. I got to be careful.
Yeah, exactly. I know we touched on it a little bit here, but we're staring down the pipe of 3 seasons in a row with Mike Sullivan missing the playoffs. I mean, at what point does FSG kind of look at him and be like, all right, it's time to move on here, make a change? I mean, I'm just asking you, Josh. Maybe you have a little insider scoop on that. What's the leash looking like on Mike Sullivan here? Like I said, 3 seasons here. We're missing the playoffs again. I mean, at what point do we just kind of nix this guy and move on?
I understand the frustration. I do. I can tell you from everything I have seen and everyone I've talked to, FSG loves Mike Sullivan. And I've written this before. I had a guy in the franchise tell me that. And remember, these are all Boston guys, right? FSG, he's their Bill Belichick. They really think that. So I don't think he's going anywhere. And I think Sullivan, if he wanted to go, he could have had the New Jersey job last season. The Devils wanted him really bad, and he knew it. Everybody knew it, and it would have made a lot of sense for him. That team's good. He could win a cup there. And his grandchild and his wife live in Boston, and his daughters live in Boston. It would have been a lot closer to home for him. It would have made sense. Whether you like Mike Sullivan or not, you have to appreciate the loyalty he has to Crosby and Malkin and Letang, and he's told me that he doesn't want to coach anywhere else. Those are his guys, and that's the biggest thing. By the way, Sid loves him, and Sid has a lot of power. And as long as Sid wants him to be the coach, he's going to be the coach. So I agree. Listen, all the blown leads, of course, part of it is coaching. And of course, the fan base deserves to be frustrated because of it. But I would also suggest if you just look at this roster, is this really a playoff roster? I mean, I just, Crosby's playing great. That top line's phenomenal. The blue line's been better lately for sure. But I don't know that this is one of the best 8 rosters in the Eastern Conference. I don't really think it is. So I think the Penguins in their front office kind of knew this could happen again this season, and they're just trying to get a new wave of talent, in Pittsburgh in the next couple of years, and they hope Sid's still playing at a high level when that happens. Will Sully be the coach at that point? I don't know. I really don't, but it wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, you gotta love Sullivan for his. I can't believe he didn't go for New Jersey. Honestly, I thought that was going to happen. I mean, and if you listen to the show, you guys know my brother-in-law is a New Jersey Devils fan, so that would have killed me.
That team's going to win a cup in the next 3 or 4 years, probably.
I don't want to hear that. Well, thanks, Ty, for coming up. Hunter, you're up next. What's up, Hunter?
Hey, just curious with Matt Nieto and Noel Acciari. I know they're veterans in this league, but why aren't we giving someone else a chance? They get pucks deep and stuff, but they really don't generate anything. And Blake Lizotte, I love him as a player, and he had a great start of the season, playing on that third line with Beauvillier and Bunting and stuff. But ever since then, they've been cold. They kind of just eat up time out there.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I think there was a stretch for 3 or 4 games when that line was inexplicably really good. And I think Sullivan saw that and he got very comfortable with them. It's kind of like having a bunch of Craig Adams out on the ice. They're going to block shots. They can kill penalties. That's great. But eventually there's not going to be offense at all from that line, none, which we're starting to see now. Lizotte had that little run where he was scoring goals. I think Lazotte's a nice little player, actually. I kind of like him on the fourth line. I don't think he's an issue, but the other two are. And Nieto in particular, pretty good penalty killer. That's great. But you know how it is in the NHL. You need 4 lines that can contribute offensively to some extent, especially when you look at the Penguins. Sid's actually playing unbelievable right now. I mean, the last 2 or 3 weeks, he's gone into Sid mode, right? But Gino's not the player he was. Let's be honest. Okay, so it's not like those guys are going to be carrying things for the Penguins the way they have in the past, which means you need your bottom 6 to score some. And that fourth line's not going to score. Not regularly for sure. So I agree with you. I don't like that line. I'm glad Puliarvi was back in the lineup tonight. I think it's been bizarre that he's been out of the lineup. I think he's actually somebody that can really contribute offensively in that bottom six. Thought he was okay tonight. I'd like to see him play again Thursday against his former team and see how he looks. But yeah, that line is getting frustrating because you just know there's nothing there offensively.
Yeah, do you think they're just giving them kind of the benefit of the doubt because they're at the end of their career and they're just kind of, I don't know, going out there for kind of shits and gigs and just to play out their last couple seasons?
No, I don't think it's that really. I think they're the kind of players that make coaches comfortable because they never screw up. You know what I mean? Like they don't
Yeah,
have any
yeah, yeah.
talent, but you know you can trust them to not do
They're doing
anything.
the same thing every night.
Yeah, like there's something consistent about them at least, where it's like people like Gino and Eric Carlson drive coaches nuts by their very nature because you never know what they're going to do. So yeah, there's a comfortability there. They are good penalty killers, all three of them. So there is something to be said for that. But like the problem is just Achari and Nieto in particular are so slow and there's just not any skill there. And when you have two guys like that on the same line, it's just an issue. And I watch other games around the league and see other teams play against the Penguins, and you see guys on their third and fourth lines. Like you watch Winnipeg and Adam Lowry's on their third line for Christ's sake. Like it's just night and day. It really is. So it's an issue moving forward, no question. The good news
Yeah,
is
because
like
scoring wise, we have three lines, and the fourth is just kind of out
right.
there.
And I mean, honestly, right now the Penguins are kind of a one-line team. Let's be
One
honest.
line, yeah.
I mean, I obviously they have some talent on the second and third lines, but it might be other than the goaltending issues. Their biggest problem right now, they're just so reliant on the power play and that first line. And luckily for the Penguins, they've been great in those areas, but they're going to need some scoring from the rest of their forwards here really fast.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you guys.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for coming up. Sager Bombs, you're up next. That's York for Heisman with Sager Bombs.
Hey guys, appreciate you guys putting this together. Josh, just curious. I know last year I was one of them. Everybody was disappointed at the Getzel return. If you look at it, seemed pretty fair after you look at it.
Mhm.
A couple prospects. What realistically do you think we could expect for Patterson?
Oh boy, really good question. And yeah, I remember at the time everybody was so pissed at the against the Jake didn't get back like, four top prospects or something. Like Penguins didn't have any leverage. That was the problem. I thought the return was okay in retrospect. Pedersen, I would think if you're the Penguins, you're happy to get a second round pick, maybe a mid level prospect as well. You're not getting a first round pick for him, certainly not the way he's playing right now. Um, that would be my guess. I assume that would be their desire. And if that's the case, like it's worth it to trade him. I know nobody ever wants to see their guys get traded, but this is not a Stanley Cup team. You can trade Marcus Pedersen and not wonder what would have been. So if you get a second round pick for him, or if you get like a legitimately good prospect, well, that makes your system better, and you can always go into free agency and sign another Marcus Pedersen this summer. I mean, those guys are out there. He's a good player. He's not a great player. So I'm sure they would love a second round pick, but I honestly can't answer that question entirely right now because we don't know what the market will be like in 2 months. We don't know. Maybe a bunch of defensemen will get hurt, and a guy like Marcus is a much hotter commodity. That happens. That happens a lot. Or maybe it will be the opposite. It could be a buyer's market. It could be a seller's market. We don't know. But I would be shocked if Marcus is a Penguin after March 7th. I think the deadline. Yeah, the deadline's March 7th. Penguins playing Vegas that night. In fact, I would not expect him to be back. And on a personal level, I love Marcus, one of the nicest human beings on earth. I will miss dealing with that guy an awful lot. He's a good egg, but I just can't imagine he'll be back.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Thanks for coming up, Sager Bombs. I like that name. Hannah, you're up next. What's up, Hannah?
Hi guys. I was just wondering because I think it's just been so noticeable the last few games, especially because we've had so many shootouts. And you touched on this a little bit, but Sidney Crosby's shootout is not what it used to be, and I'm just really curious as to what your thoughts are as to like why that is, because obviously he's playing at an elite level. He has such patience on the ice. He scores goals, but he can't score on the shootout. So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that and why Sully can put him out like first or second.
Well, yeah, Hannah, you're absolutely right. It's been clear to see, and I think when we watch Sid in shootouts, like I mentioned confidence level earlier, like even with the greatest players of all time, their confidence levels can go up and down. He looks unsure of himself to me in those situations. Why does Sully put him out there? Well, number one, I don't think he has any other options that are necessarily better, and it's Sidney Crosby, so that's just the way it's always going to be. Watching Sid on breakaways, and Corey and I are both like big Mario fans historically speaking, and Mario Lemieux always had a thing on. Mario is the greatest breakaway artist ever by far. And guys would ask him for advice, like before penalty shots, what do I do? What do I do on breakaways? And Mario's advice was always the same. He always said, go in with speed. You go in with speed. You're not thinking about it. You're just reacting. You don't give the goalie time to figure out what you're doing. And now we see guys like Sid's been doing it a lot going super slow motion. Like Patrick Kane was the one who really started doing that. It doesn't usually work though. Certainly not for Sid. I don't think it's just not comfortable for him. And I always find Sid's at his very best when he's playing the game at 100 miles per hour. When he's going full flight, that's when he's at his best. When the game becomes stationary, I don't think that's when he's his most effective. So um, I don't know. I agree with you. Here, those the last two shootout attempts he had in Florida and tonight against Columbus was really bad. I mean, you didn't have any confidence that the puck was going to go in those shootouts, did you? So, yeah, it's an interesting thing moving forward, and where the Penguins are right now in the standings. Man, you can't keep losing those points in shootouts. That has burned them the last couple of years, and it might again.
Agree. Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Yeah.
Hannah.
Thanks, Hannah. Don, you're up next. And boy, I mean, Josh, before we get to Don, that Mario, we've talked about before, I think outside of the podcast, Mario in his prime in the shootout would have been the most disgusting thing the NHL's ever seen. I mean, he would have been like 90%. Like, I can't think
Literally.
of many breakaways that he didn't score on
Yeah,
back in
he
his
was
prime.
6 for 8 lifetime on penalty shots and 5 for 5 at one point in his younger days, especially. Now he literally would have, even against bigger goaltenders in this era, he would have been like 70%. Like literally, he was that much better on breakaways than anybody who ever lived.
Yeah, he was unbelievable. Don, go ahead, hit the unmute button. Got a question for Josh? Don, hit that microphone button in the corner.
Okay,
There we
thanks.
go. Hey,
Yeah.
Don.
Stuart Skinner was hurt tonight in Boston. Do you think maybe Mr. Dubas could sweet talk him into Jari?
Maybe he'll try. It's funny. I wasn't aware of that. I know Edmonton won 4-0. I think in Boston. I didn't know Skinner got hurt. Um, but it's funny. We always would hear Edmonton as a rumored destination for Jari when trade rumors would come up. Of course, he won the Memorial Cup while playing for the Edmonton Oil Kings. I think in 2014, I want to say, and he lives there in the off season. He skates with a lot of the Oilers, so that would be the perfect place for him. But with the Oilers' salary cap situation, I just they're right up against the cap, and they're going to want to make some other moves because they're frankly not as good on paper as they were last spring when they almost won the cup. So I like where your mind is. I like it, Don. You're trying to make this trade happen for Jari, and Edmonton historically always made sense, but I'm telling you, I just don't think anybody would want him right now.
Yeah.
Time will tell.
Hopefully somebody takes him. We're all sitting here with our fingers crossed. It's just if they could watch whenever we don't have a 2-goal lead, if they could just miss the first shot of the game. Like if you're Kyle Dubas trying to get a set, like sell them, just tune into the second period. Like we should have given up a goal by then. You won't notice. First shot again tonight. Thanks, Don, for coming
Is that
up.
the sixth time?
HUD,
Sixth time he's given up the first shot for a goal.
I think sixth or seventh.
Jesus, I mean,
It's
yeah.
it's
And a
it's
lot of
like
those
I've
haven't been bad goals, by the way. Like they give up some really juicy looks, but still, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, and like I said, I wish there was a way to bet on that. Like if you could just bet on first goal, first shot,
Oh,
you'd be making a lot of money
that's
this
right.
year. Um, so thanks, Don, for coming up. Hudson, you're up next.
Hello, guys. I just want to say we have a grocery store clerk playing left wing on the fourth line in Nero. I love his story, but it's time to go. Like, can we do a Jeff Carter thing with him? Because there's nothing there. Like, there's nothing there for him. And like Lazat carries that line. Achari's been hit or miss, 50-50 up and down. I like him, but I mean, Puliarvi has been there for the past month. He hasn't gotten any time. So I mean, like, what are we doing? And
I,
I think in the AHL we have some players down there that can help us. I mean, Rutgers, he's having a heck of a season. Ponomarev, he's having a heck of a season. And I mean, I just don't know what we can do at this point. I think this season's a punt. Next season, cap goes up, but like we have Graves sitting there. He's 5.5 million that isn't getting played. I just don't know what we do.
well, it's listen. I don't envy Kyle Dubas right now. I know he's making a lot of money to make these decisions, but the Penguins are in a weird spot because we've seen it this year. As long as Sidney Crosby's on this team and still playing the way he is, they're never going to get like a top 5 draft pick unless they get really lucky in the draft lottery. There's not. They're not going to be that bad. They're not going to bottom out. But you know as well as I, looking at this roster, this is no Stanley Cup contender. I mean, it's just not. And I agree with you with Nieto. He's a nice guy to have around. If you get a couple of injuries, you can throw him out there. He's not going to embarrass you. But yeah, I would love to see somebody young get a shot in the bottom 6. Not necessarily Rutger. I think the best thing for Rutger might be just to play in Wilkes-Barre all season, where he's been much better, by the way. He had a terrible start, and the last month he's been really, really good. That's encouraging. They need him to be a major player for them in the near future. I don't know if he's going to be ready this season or not. But yeah, it almost feels like you're just giving up when you have those guys out there. And Nieto's the biggest problem on that line. Like Achari, you know what? He's physical. He's a good penalty killer. I think he scored 4 goals. If he scores 10 goals, okay. You
And he
can,
plays with a lot of juice. Like, I
yeah,
mean, he can, like, his hits, his block shots.
yes.
There
No,
was a, like, 2.5 week period where that was the only guy that we actually saw some physical play with. I mean, he's, in my book, he's fine with
yeah,
Lazat,
I
but
agree. And if you had a third piece, somebody who could really play with those two, that might be a good fourth line. I agree with you. So it's going to be interesting to see how they address this moving forward. And I thought Puliarvi looked okay tonight. He hadn't played in almost a month, so I wouldn't expect him to be, without a little bit of rust. But I'd like to see him stay in the lineup and figure out a good spot for him because I still think he's one of their 12 best forwards without question.
oh, for sure. And I never understood why he got scratched in the first place. I mean, for the first month and a half,
Yeah,
he was putting up points, he
I
was
know.
playing well, and
Oh,
I
he's big.
ever
He's
since.
fast. He was. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I know. It's just funny how certain players can do things that can irritate a coaching staff. Like I know he took a couple of bad penalties, and that got him in the doghouse a little bit.
But who
Bunting,
doesn't?
Bunting did the same thing in October. But you know what? Sometimes you got to play your best players and live with the fact that they might make some mistakes. That's my thought on Puliarvi.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe Puliarvi, and thanks Hudson for coming up. I
Thank you,
was
boys.
thinking Puliarvi maybe like had eaten like the last of Mike Sullivan's favorite cereal at the arena or something. Like he just did something like insulted like his dog or I don't know what. But anyways, TJ Wagoner, you're up next, or Flexed Profit. What's up, man?
Hey, Josh, Corey, thanks for having me on. I am one thing I noticed, especially at the start of this season, is how flat-footed I guess the Penguins looked, and especially one thing I think that is never really brought up is their mentality when it really comes to playing hockey. Is they just I don't know if you guys see it or if anybody else does, but like they just seem so not in it. I guess, especially like I said at the start of the season, they just seemed like, man, this is it. They're ready to punt kick this season already, and of course, they had this stretch coming through December. They looked a little more in it, but like as soon as that game went into mid overtime, they just looked like, no, this is it. Just get rid of it. It's gone.
Well, I think a lot of that is their age. People don't want to hear that. No, it's not like Sidney Crosby doesn't
No,
care.
yeah.
We all know that. But I will say, just the way they looked in all of October in general. I remember, I'll never forget it. It was 6 years ago now, 2018. I'm talking with Jim Rutherford in Toronto after a morning skate. And I said, Jim, team looks like shit right now. I was like 5 games into the season. He said, I'm not worried. I said, why? He said, we're old. He said, old guys always need a month to get going, so it's fine. And that was
Yeah.
6 years ago. So, think about how old the core of this team is now. And also, and I'm not trying to defend them, they were terrible in October. But they also had a brutal schedule. I mean, they had the Rangers when they were good, at Toronto, at Edmonton, at Vancouver, at Winnipeg, like a really, really daunting schedule. So we should consider that as well. It's not that they don't care. I promise you they care. I just think age is a factor, and I think just the way the team is built, they just don't have guys that play with a pizzazz. It's just kind of a boring
The
roster,
energy.
right? Yeah, like they just don't. I mean, there's no, and this team is, and I realize the Penguins didn't win anything with these guys, but they've never been the same since they lost Brandon Tanev and Jared McCann
Oh
on the
man,
same weekend. Think this team could
I
use
was
Brandon
just
Tanev?
gonna say that.
Yeah, of course they could. And that was, listen, I'm not going to sit here and bash Ron Hextall. God, I've spent enough of my career doing that. But to lose McCann and Tanev in the same
In the
damn
same
weekend,
season.
like that
Oh
was
yeah.
that was a fireable offense. I'm sorry. And,
Yeah.
all for the sake of protecting Jeff Carter. And by the way, I've talked with numerous people in the Seattle organization. They had zero interest in Jeff Carter. He did not need to be protected. I promise you. You could have very easily protected McCann or Tanev. And boy, couldn't the Penguins use either of those guys right now. So,
Oh yeah, that thinking of like Brandon Tanev reminds me of almost prime Connor Sherry during the back-to-back cup run. That just a firecracker bouncing off the walls. I mean, nobody, I can't really name anybody, maybe aside from Lazat, that could really replicate that in the same room or in the same area that like Tanev or Connor Sherry even could have.
yeah, no, Tanev was unique. He was like a little Connor Sherry and a little bit of Matt Cook all rolled into one. Like he was a physical
Oh dude, I
guy, and
love Tanev.
he was just so fast. And I don't know how many of people listening attend games regularly. I'm sure a lot of you do. I find, I'm privileged. I get to, be at every game, and you really notice when you're in. I find it's more difficult to notice it on TV, but when you are at the game the last couple of years, you see how slow the Penguins are. Like you,
Yeah,
you just see it in
yeah,
person. And guys like Tanev and McCann who could really fly, like they never replace them. And you're going to see it Thursday
yeah.
night when McDavid's on the ice. I realize he's faster than everyone, but there's a reason the Oilers have absolutely murdered the Penguins the last 6 or 7 times they've played. It's just
Pure
the team
speed.
speed. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what made the Penguins special many years ago, and they've gotten away from that, and it's one of their many problems. But you see it in person, especially the last couple of years. They just look painfully slow against certain teams.
Yeah, for a coach that always functions on, oh, we don't want to be physical. We want to kill them with these moves and our speed. For a coach that emphasize that, they sure as hell don't do it.
No, well, and the front office hasn't given him a team that has a whole lot of speed either. That's one
Yeah,
thing. That's why I think that's why we like Blake Lazat so much. Not just that he
yeah,
scored goals, but he can skate. At least
yeah,
he brings that element that they just don't have enough guys who are
yeah.
doing
I
that.
guess that's why they preferred Bavillier for a while because Bavillier played with such speed, but his
Yes,
finish just, I don't know. I mean, it was there at the start of the season, but it's kind of tailored a little
he
bit
hasn't
off.
been terrible, but he's one of those guys. There have been many games where I haven't noticed him. Also,
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's on
yeah.
pace for like 18 goals, but I don't really think he's going to score 18 goals.
Oh God, no.
He had you speak of his finishing. He had a shot tonight where it looked like he used a broom to sweep it towards the puck, towards the net. It was just like, good lord.
Yeah, I think I know
Um,
which one you're talking about.
yeah, it's just, but oh boy.
Yeah.
And yeah, and Ron Hextall, the enemy within.
Ugh.
Good lord, he has just destroyed this franchise. So,
That
hey,
yeah, that
thanks for
steps
coming
back.
up. Thanks for coming up,
Oh yeah, thank you
TJ.
guys. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, sure thing.
Yep. Yeah, Jay, go ahead.
Man, my night was already bad enough, and then Josh had to start talking about Hextall. Gee, many Christmas.
Sorry.
Just kidding. My first rant, and I'm not one of these people that I don't bash officials. Actually, I officiate basketball, so I defend officials. But my problem with the NHL is no one can tell me that if the game was tied at 3, that call's not made. If the Penguins were down 3-2, that call's not made. I hate that the calls seem to be like dependent on the score of the game,
No,
and it just drives me nuts.
you are absolutely correct. I like to call it officiating the score. That's exactly what these guys do. It's always been that way. I started watching hockey in the late '80s. Is that you knew then if a game was tied, with 5 minutes left, no penalties were being called. But if a team was losing, there was a good chance that it was going to get a power play. It's just the way it is,
Yeah,
and I don't like it. I thought that was a terrible call on Lasat. I mean, I thought that was a really, really bad call. Even made worse by with what 4 minutes left in regulation in a one-goal game.
yep,
That was I don't know. And somebody was at Achari. I don't know if it was before or after. Achari took a high stick to the face right after a face-off.
yes,
So
yep,
same ref, same side of the ice, no call.
yep.
Um,
But
yeah,
but my Penguin.
I
I'm
know
sorry.
Sullivan was very upset after the game about that. He was asked about the penalty and he responded it was a stick lift. That's all he said. So that's all you need to know.
Well, my Penguin question is, I mean, the core is the core. They're all kind of agreed to stick this thing out, but would a guy like Raquel, who's not never won a cup,
Mm.
do you think he would be willing to? I think he's got a no trade clause too, right?
He has a partial no trade clause.
Partial. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think he would waive that to go maybe to go chase a cup? Do you think he'd be a guy that's?
Mm. Um,
I mean, he's having a great year. I think he could at least get us something. I
Tough
mean,
to say. I actually wrote about him in the Athletic today. A lot of people have kind of been assuming that he'll be traded. There will be a market for him. You could certainly get a nice return for Ricard Raquel, who's on pace for almost 40 goals now. Um, whether he's playing with Crosby or obviously it's helping playing with Sid, but he's a good NHL player who just happened to have an off season last year. I I think it's possible that they trade Raquel, but my sense is that it probably won't happen this season. Now, next summer, now that's a different story altogether. But if the Penguins are still like within range of a playoff spot come March, I think it's going to be awfully hard.
Oh, Josh must have got another phone call.
I think I get the premise of what he was saying, though. I mean, I
Yeah.
agree. If they're on the fringe of a wild card spot, it is going to be tough to justify saying, I'm going to send out my top one.
Years. So there's no rush to trade Raquel. Now, what I do with this summer, if somebody offered a really big package in return, sure, I'd consider it because his value is never going to be higher than it is right now. But I don't sense that they're in a rush to trade him. And with the way that top line is operating right now, it's a tough line to break up, whether you're a cup contender or not. They're playing unbelievable hockey together.
Very true.
Yeah.
Well, guys,
Hey,
I
Jay.
appreciate you putting this together.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
No.
Yeah.
Have
Hey,
a great
Cory,
Thanks.
we
night,
should do
guys.
this more often. This is good. We've had good questions.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's been good. It's been fun. We try to do this. Yeah. And I found that Joe texted, he's not doing comedy tonight. They're dealing with fires and wind out in California. So hopefully
I didn't
he's
know
staying
that.
safe.
My mom texted me today because she knows I'm going to California next week for the Penguins road trip, and she's like, "Be careful, there are fires out there." I'm like, "Well, Mom, I'm not going to drive into a fire." Like I appreciate that, but I didn't realize how serious it was. I shouldn't. I don't mean to make fun. It's apparently like a really bad situation out there right now. So
Yeah. Yeah. I've spent, I mean, as someone in the industry, I've spent a lot of time out there, as you know,
yeah,
Josh, and
right.
it gets scary quick. Like it's in Joe's and where he's living. So we'll text him, make sure. But I think he's he's doing all right. Well, one last one here. I know a bunch of you wanted to come up, but apologies. We'll have to cut it. Danny, we'll get the last question to come on in, and it really kills me. By the way, I see Jeff down there with the Michigan national champions, so it kills me
Oh,
to not bring up a
a
Michigan
man after
guy.
Cory's heart.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but Danny, go ahead. What's up, man?
Josh, what's up, buddy?
Yeah. Hi,
As
Danny.
someone who severely misses your road trip storytelling, I would love to hear your favorite off ice story from the season that you can tell without getting in trouble.
My favorite off ice story from this particular season.
Or last season, either one.
Oh man. First of all, Danny, I miss having you around. Dan, this is Danny who used to cover the Penguins for DK Pittsburgh's whatever the website is, dkpittsburghsports.com. Thanks thanks for chiming in. And Danny and I've told Danny many a good story that I can't repeat, of course. The problem with the Penguins, like of this current generation, is just how boring they are. Like there's not really much fun in the way that goes on these days in terms of what might make for an entertaining story. So now I'm like trying to rack my brain thinking of anything. And no, it's been like horribly dull, in fact, because they've reached like the old age now where it's like Latang and Malkin's kid shows up sometimes, like when they're on road trips, and it's all nice and cuddly like that. That's the big storyline. Whereas in the old days, it was like, I guess we got drunk and made bad decisions last night. I wish I could have covered the early '90s Penguins, who, like, I would have written many books about their off ice exploits. But now I hate to disappoint the listeners, but there's like really nothing all that entertaining going on. I'm trying to think of anything, like even locker room stories. I guess my favorite locker room story last season, Danny, the Penguins lost a game in overtime in Carolina. Doesn't that sound familiar? And I asked Tristan Jarry after the game. I said, Tristan, I said, it looked like you were screened on that shot. Did you have a good look at the puck? And I swear to God, he looked at me and he said, I don't know. I'll have to watch the film. And I just stood there and looked at him, and we actually haven't spoken since. I don't think I after that answer, I was like, I don't know what to ask the guy. Like I didn't know if he was like trying to be a jerk or if he just like has his canned answers that he goes to. It's like, wow. I said, you have to watch the tape to see if you could see the puck. That's actually an extraordinary answer. It actually made me laugh. But that was probably my favorite, at least locker room correspondence from last season.
Brother, I am surprised it took you that long to stop asking him questions.
Tristan doesn't like the media very much, and eventually, yeah, like I feel bad for him on some level because I know things aren't going so great for him, but he doesn't often offer a lot of insight. He sure does throw his teammates under the bus a lot, though. My goodness.
Yeah.
What a guy.
Sounds like he should go over to the South Side. Maybe he'd fit right in the Steelers locker room.
Yes. He still talks more to
uh,
the media than those guys do. But
yeah, that's true. That's true. Danny, thanks for coming. I knew I recognized you from somewhere, so that must have been
thanks, Danny.
the DK days.
Yeah,
But
good talking to you, Josh.
appreciate it, guys, and also just a quick shout out. We want to say we appreciate Mr. Bill Neofis. If you're looking for insurance, go
Damn
hit
right.
up the Reg Dunlap of insurance. That would be Bill Neofis.
By God, he is.
So, yeah, Josh, this was great, and it wasn't a great Penguin game, but it was a good therapy session for everyone.
You know what's funny? I was supposed to be off tonight, which is why we're doing this. And apparently, there's been a Rob Rossi computer meltdown, so I'm about to make a dramatic appearance from the bullpen.
Oh boy, you guys are getting the inside info.
Good thing I was watching.
Yeah. Well, for those of you that didn't get up, we'll get you next time, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Thanks for listening, everybody.